Tim Willis with Creating with ClickDesigns. I hope you're doing well. Today we have a tutorial video on the text element and the tools that we have available to work with the text element. It's a little walkthrough on that, and it's part of a series I will be doing on the toolbox and how it interfaces with different elements and what the options are. And this is in preparation for what will eventually be a series of analysis videos that we're going to do, where we will take a graphic and analyze it and see what's going on. But before we do that, we need to get to know our tools a little better. And so that is what we're doing today. This is the first video in this series. And once again, this introduction is being filmed on my laptop using OBS and a webcam, so I really can't see myself when I'm talking like this. So if my head's a little cockeyed or tilted or funny position, just I apologize for that, but kind of doing this on cheap, and I'm doing it on the fly because I'm getting these videos done in between doing other things. And I really would like to get at least one video out a week for everybody. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and go to the tutorial. As usual, we are starting from the main interface of ClickDesigns. And so what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be looking at the tools we have in the toolbox available for the text element. And the reason why I am doing this series on the toolbox and how it relates to various elements is down the road I plan on doing some analysis videos where we're not going to be making something in ClickDesign, but we're going to be bringing one of the custom graphics here in this area here that ClickDesign provides us, and they have new custom graphics every month coming out, so there's always a fresh supply of new things. We're going to take one of those and we are going to analyze how they put it together and what's going on with it. But before we do that, we need to know what tools we have available and how they relate to what we're looking at. So what we're going to do is, as usual, go to our reliable start from scratch function, and we're going to create a new design. And we are going to name this text tools. Start with a blank canvas, and then we will click continue. We will accept the default canvas size and click continue. Now once we are in the editor now, first thing I'm going to do is go to my background, and for now I am going to make the background black, because I think that for certain things that's going to make things show up better. And then in the toolbox, I'm going to go to my text section, and I'm going to add a new text layer. This is how we always start off, to create a new text box. It will put it in the middle of the screen, and you'll see it has a blue boundary box with our sizing handles on it. Now we don't see anything because by default the text is always black when you create a new text element. So we're going to go ahead and change that to white for right now, and so we can get a good look at what we're looking at. Now another thing about this is that when you create a new text element, it's always going to be in the center, and the edit text box is always going to say new text, which is fine for what we're doing. You can type in there whatever you want, and it always starts out in the font of Arial. So that is a constant that never changes with the text element. So what we're going to do to start off with is I am just going to grab one of these dangling sizing handles, make this thing a lot bigger, so it'll be easier for it to be seen on the video. Alright, so that's a nice big size. So we are going to now look at the top here. We already talked about adding a new text layer. Here's our edit text box, which by the way can hold a lot of text. I've had up to a page of text in that box. So I don't know what the ultimate limit is, but it's a lot. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I am going to turn the single line of text into 2 lines, because first thing we have is the text alignment here. And you can align left, which it is right now. You can align right, or you can align center. That is how that works, and it will have no effect on the single line. It's only going to notice that on multiple lines of text. All right, so we're now going to go back to a single line here. Next, we have our color, which you can choose any color you want. You can either type in a hex or an RGB code into the box, or you can click on it and use the color mixer. To the right, we have the hue strip, and we have the opacity control right there. We also have another opacity control further on down. We're going to leave it white for right now. Below that, we have the other text option, which is going to be just our common text options. So we have a choice of bold, italicize, underline, strike through, overline, and then we have the 2 buttons here, the uppercase and lowercase buttons, that will change the text where we have right round to all uppercase, all lowercase. And below that, we have the font size slider, which is just the font size in pixels. We can move it up, move it down, however we want to do. And then we have the font family. Now, the font family is one of my favorite features of ClickDesigns. Well, I don't say it's a favorite feature, but I really like the way they've done this. As I said before, we're defaulting Arial. Now, if we click on our font family, we see we have a list of fonts that doesn't go on forever, but it goes on for a while. But here's what I like, is as you put your mouse cursor over each font, it will change the way your text looks on the screen, so you can tell what the font's going to look like. Not all programs do this. There's a lot of programs where you have to click on a font, look at the change. If you don't like that, click on another font, look at the change. But it's sort of like, instead of giving you this preview like we have in ClickDesigns, it's do one thing, don't like it, do another thing, don't like that either. And finally, 17 steps later, you finally find the font you want. But we don't have to do that in ClickDesigns. Now let's go ahead. We're just going to pick out something here. And we'll just pick out Cabin and go with that font for the rest of the exercise. All right, below that, we have the line height. Now, once again, I am going to make this a 2-line piece of text to demonstrate this. For our line height, we can adjust our line height, and we can also in here go and type in an amount. I'm going to just set this to 1. It's generally by default 1.16, but 1 will be good enough for what we're doing. And then I am going to make it a single line of text again. And we come to our letter spacing below that. And letter spacing is the distance between your letters. Now, this letter spacing control will go in a positive or a negative direction. So in the positive direction, you get more space between the letters. If we go the negative direction, we get less space. And if you take it to the extreme, you get a bundle of letters in a mess. But we're going to take that back to 0, back where we were. And then below that, we have our angle control. Now, it has presets from 90, 180, 270, 360 degrees. And 360 degrees is the same thing as 0. Now, the way this works, if we move this in the center a little bit, is we're going to add 15 degrees of angle to it. Okay, so in the positive direction, we have our text line pointing downward to the right. Now, if we go the opposite way and go 15 degrees negative, we had reverse action where it's pointed upwards to the right. And then if we just press on 360, we get it right back where we want. If we were to press 90, it's going to be in that aligned in that direction, going downwards. If we press 270, it will be aligned vertically, but going upwards. And then if we would take it 360, we would go back to our 0 position. Below that is an opacity slider control, which is just your typical opacity control. Goes from 0 to 100. And again, this is the other opacity control. Of course, you have one on the color mixer itself too. And below this is sort of a section, I think of it as the advanced section. And this is the section that will, one of the sections that will change a lot depending on what element you're working with. These are the options we have for the text element. And so at this point, I'm going to change things up here. Go to my background and make it white. And then select my boundary box and go up to the color and make the letters black. And you'll see why I'm doing this in just a moment. So we'll go back to our text. Scroll all the way down to that section. First option we have is shadow. So if we click on that, it didn't work because I didn't have my boundary box selected. All right, we're going to click on shadow, and it's a typical shadow effect. We have an option of horizontal and vertical offsets, a blur control, and you can put any color you want for the shadow. And that's pretty much your typical shadow effect. You've seen it many times before. Below that, we have a gradient color effect, which is nice. And in this case, we have 2 colors we can choose from. It always defaults to a red and a blue color. We have controls for each color, and we have a gradient angle control that will move the colors around. Now we also have a choice between a linear and a radial gradient. Now, as we're working with a line of text, that's not going to be very significant, although we can change it up, and you know, it's kind of changed it up. But it's going to be more significant if you're doing something like doing a background and making a gradient, or a larger element and making a gradient. But you know, that is nice that you can do gradients and have all these gradient colors on there. Next one is the advanced text style, which is kind of got some funky things to the lettering. Now you have, of course, this one that curves letters. Then we have one that goes small to large, large to small, and one that just squeezes it in the middle. And the curved aspect, if you press the arrow, it has a control that will manipulate it even more. If we click out of that, we can get out of that. This is actually the curved letter is the only one I've used, and you know, it's not something you want to use all the time, but it's there. You turn that off, and of course the last of these advanced, what I'm calling the advanced effects for text, is the stroke, which will outline your text with a color. In this case, it's the default red that's always there when you start off. And then we have a stroke width control. So depending on how much you throw in there, you can get some fairly unique and bold looking colors. And then if we go back to our default about 1, it's like that. And so that is another way you can play with 2 colors and kind of put I guess what you would call a trim on your original color of letters. And we'll turn that off. And so now we're back to our black letters on the white screen. Down here, this will always be here, the other layer options. And some of them are not too significant on a single line of text. We start off on the top row with, top row, bring forward and send backwards controls, which is for your layering. If you want to have 2 elements, they're overlapping, you want to bring one on top of the other, that is a way to do it. Back to our other layer options, we have a, let's move this kind of cockeyed here. We have a center horizontally control, which will center whatever you have horizontally. And then we have a center vertically control. So if you use them both on an element, it's going to put it in the center of the screen. Now, as well, just to mention this, it's a little digression. Up at this top toolbar, you have a grid you can use, and you have a snap function for the grid. So that is another way that you can line up things in relationship to each other. And then we have a duplicate button, which we also have a drop down. If we put our mouse cursor over an element and we right click, and I really didn't want to do that, but it will, let's go ahead and try. That works better. Don't know why it did that, but we used our undo button and got back. Right here we have several of the functions that are on the other layer options available on this drop down, and the duplicate is one of them. So let's go ahead and hit this. We'll duplicate that by clicking on that. And we're going to have some fun here in a little bit. So let's put these two here close to each other. Then I'm going to duplicate one more time. Put this one down with some more space between it. So that is the duplicate function. Next, we have, let's choose this one here. I hate it when it blues out everything, don't you? Okay, so we have a flip horizontally control, which will just flip whatever you got selected horizontally, and then you click it one more time, flips back. Same thing with flip vertically, it'll flip it upside down, and then one more time and it'll be right side up. Those probably aren't real useful for a piece of text, but it's useful for other things. We have a lock function, which is might not be what you think it is. So the lock function, we have this element down here already selected. If we choose lock, it now won't move, but the other two can move. Now if you notice, this one, whenever we select it, the button is lit up. Now what happens if we select another one? Let's choose this one at the very top and also lock it. Again, it won't move, but the one in the middle will still move, and the one down here is still locked as well. So you can use the lock function to lock individual items. So when we don't want it locked anymore, we just click the button and it goes back to being unlocked. And we have this one locked up here, so let's go ahead and unlock it. All right, then we have a function here. Let's put these closer together of select all. And when we get select all, you see each one has its own boundary box, and then there's a bigger boundary box around all of them. And so we've selected all of these. You might call it a group, but we don't want to because there's an actual group function. So this is select all, and so everything moves that's on the screen. So if you had, for example, maybe you just started working on something, you've got some elements in the upper right hand corner, and you said, well, I want them to go to the lower left hand corner. I don't want to move all of them one by one. You can use select all at that point and move everything on the screen. But once you do that, you're going to kind of have it's sort of a feast or famine type situation where it's everything or it's nothing. Let's go ahead and unselect that. Now, and then the other thing we have is a fit to screen function. Now, and we're not really going to worry about that in this exercise. Now, I want to show you something else that's related to, but not the same as select all, and that's grouping. And so let's go ahead and put this up here, put this one fairly close there again, and put some space between this one. Now, grouping, you need to think of it in terms of it being a one-shot deal. In other words, it's not going to be select all where it stays that way until you actually push the button, make a choice on the buttons down here in the other layers option. Grouping, you might think of it as like a one-shot deal. So if we select one of our text elements and we press shift and then we select another text element, they are now grouped and they will move together. Now, also notice that right now the select all buttons lit up while we have that group. But here's where it gets different. If we click outside the group boundary box and we go back to our other layer options here, you'll see the button is no longer lit up. That's because these are no longer locked together. So the group is good if you just need to grab a couple things and move them one time to a different area, but it's not something you would want to depend on to keep something in place while you're moving a bunch of things around. And that is almost the end of what we're looking at on this tutorial. And of course we have the delete button at the bottom, handily in red, and of course you can also access that from your drop down and right mouse click. So that is our tutorial for today on the toolbox functions for the text element. And so I'm going to be making, or at least it is my plan, to make several of these videos on different elements to show what tools are available, because it does change based on which element you're working with. Some have more options, some have less. You know, when you're doing with something, say like an icon, which is graphical, versus an image, which may be a photograph or a piece of artwork, you're going to have some totally different options between the two. And so kind of need to know these things, because it's really helpful to know when you're choosing a particular kind of element ahead of time, what kind of ability you're going to have to manipulate it on the cabinets later on. And when we get into doing the analysis videos, that's going to play a big role, and you'll see how all this ties together with the different functions of the toolbox as they are linked up with a particular kind of element. But that is the video for today, and so this is Tim Willis with Creating with ClickDesigns. If you are interested in ClickDesigns, there's a link where you can learn more about it in the description below. There's also a link to my Facebook group, Creating with ClickDesigns, that is a companion to this YouTube channel, also entitled Creating with ClickDesigns. So this is Tim Willis with Creating with ClickDesigns. Like and subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is made, and I'm trying to get out at least a video a week. We'll have another tutorial out soon, and you have a nice day.